The storm rolled in quickly, dark clouds swallowing the sky as if the world itself had decided to unravel. Emma sat in her car outside Michael's apartment, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. There. Argument had been small, ordinary, one of those little disagreements that always seemed to grow sharper with Michael. He wanted her to move forward with him marriage, a bigger apartment, planning for the future. She should have been happy. She should have smiled, nodded, and said yes. But instead, when he asked, "Emma, don't you want this too?" her silence betrayed her. Michael's frustration boiled over. "You're always holding back. Sometimes I wonder if you even see a future with me." His words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. She did care for him deeply. But when he spoke of marriage, of forever, something inside her hesitated. Something she couldn't name, something that felt like an empty space she didn't know how to fill. So she drove. The rain pounded on her windshield, blurring the world into streaks of gray. She didn't have a destination in mind, but her heart knew before her mind caught up. Daniel. When she pulled into the driveway of the small rental house he was staying in. The storm was in full force. Rain plastered her hair to her face as she ran to the door, her chest heaving, her heart racing. She didn't even know what she was doing, only that she couldn't bear the weight of silence anymore. The door opened, and there he was, Emma. His voice was full of shock, concern, and something deeper that he tried to hide. She stood there, dripping wet, her clothes clinging to her, shivering not just from the cold, but from everything building inside her. I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. Daniel stepped aside quickly, urging her in. "Come inside before you catch pneumonia." He grabbed a towel from the couch and draped it over her shoulders, his hands brushing against her arms in a way that sent a tremor through her. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain battered the windows, the thunder rolled. And Emma felt like the storm outside mirrored the storm inside her chest. Finally, she broke. "Daniel, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I knew what I wanted. And then you came back and suddenly," her voice cracked, "suddenly nothing makes sense." Daniel's eyes softened, his jaw tightening as if he were holding back words. "Emma, I shouldn't be here," she continued, tears mingling with the raindrops on her face. "I have Michael. He's good to me. He's steady. He's everything I thought I needed. But when I'm with you, She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. "I feel like I'm betraying him just by standing here." Silence filled the room, except for the storm raging outside. Emma lowered her hands, her gaze desperate, searching his face for something, an answer, a reason, a way out. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I came back because of you." The words hit her like lightning. Her heart stopped, then pounded so hard it hurt. "You, what?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. "I could have stayed in California. I had offers, opportunities, but none of it mattered. I kept thinking about you, about what I left behind, about how I never told you what you meant to me." He took a breath, his eyes locked on hers. "So I came back. For you." Emma's chest tightened painfully. She wanted to run, to deny it, to pretend this wasn't happening. But the truth was laid bare between them, undeniable. "Daniel, you can't say that," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It's too late." But he didn't look away. He didn't flinch. "Emma, it's too late to keep pretending." Knees felt weak. She gripped the back of the couch for support, her breath uneven. His words echoed in her mind, breaking down walls she had spent years building. She whispered, almost to herself, "I don't know who I am when I'm with you anymore." Daniel moved closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the chill of her wet clothes. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe you're finally who you're meant to be." Her heart ached with longing and fear. She thought of Michael's kindness, his stability, his steady hand in hers. And then she thought of Daniel, the way her pulse raced, the way her soul stirred, the way her heart came alive. Tears spilled. Down her cheeks, Daniel. I can't. I can't do this. He reached out then, his hand brushing her cheek, tender, hesitant, as though afraid she might pull away. But she didn't. She couldn't. The touch sent fire through her, wakening every buried dream, every secret wish. Emma, he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't have to choose right now, but don't lie to yourself. Not anymore. The storm outside raged louder, the windows rattling, the thunder shaking, the walls. Inside, Emma felt like her entire world was unraveling. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just one stolen second. A second that felt both dangerous and inevitable. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered the truth she had been terrified to admit. I never stopped thinking about you. Daniel's breath caught, his expression breaking into something raw, vulnerable, almost relieved. But before either of them could move, could act on the truth that had finally been spoken, Emma pulled away, her body trembling. I need to go, she said, her voice shaky, almost breaking. Daniel didn't stop her. He just watched as she turned and walked out into the storm again, eyes full of everything he couldn't say. And as Emma drove away into the night, tears blurring her vision, she knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the town washed clean, the air sharp with the scent of rain and earth. But inside Emma, the storm raged on. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. Heard his words echoing through her chest. I came back because of you. Her heart had leaped, her soul had stirred, but the guilt was unbearable. Michael had called the night before, his voice laced with worry. She'd lied, told him she had just needed some air, that the rain had kept her out longer than she'd planned. He believed her. Of course he did. Michael always trusted her. That was the kind of man he was. But the truth pressed against her, ribs like a weight she couldn't breathe under. She went about her routine in silence. The next day's shower, coffee, the short walk to the bookstore, but nothing felt the same. Even the streets looked different, as if the world had shifted on its axis. And then, though fate were mocking her, she saw Daniel again. He was at the coffee shop, sitting by the window with his guitar case leaning against the wall. Sunlight caught the edges of his hair, and for a moment it looked like a scene pulled from a memory and painted with something new, something sharper, stronger, impossible to ignore. Emma hesitated at the door, her heart thundering. She could leave. She should leave. But her feet betrayed her, carrying her inside. Daniel noticed her instantly. His smile was faint, cautious, as though he didn't want to scare her away. He gestured toward the empty chair across from him. Sit. Emma swallowed, her throat dry. She slid into the seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For a long moment, neither spoke. The clink of cups, the hum of quiet chatter filled the air around them, but between them, silence stretched like a fragile thread. Finally, Daniel broke. His voice was gentle, almost resigned. You can't keep pretending, Emma. Not with me, and not with yourself. Her chest tightened. Daniel, please. He leaned forward, his eyes steady, searching. I'm not trying to ruin your life. I just need you to be honest with me, with Michael, with yourself. What do you really want? The question hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to answer, but the truth was tangled, messy, dangerous. She wanted safety and stability. She wanted passion and fire. She wanted both, and yet she knew she couldn't have both. Her hands trembled. I don't know, she whispered. Yes, you do, Daniel said softly. You've always known. You just didn't want to admit it. Tears blurred her vision. He was right. She had known deep down ever since she first saw him again in that coffee shop. The way her pulse raced, the way her soul lit up, it wasn't friendship, it wasn't nostalgia. It was love. A love that had waited quietly in the shadows for years, now awakened. But love was never simple. Not when it came at the wrong time, when it threatened to shatter the life she had carefully built. Daniel, I'm scared, she admitted, her voice breaking. His expression softened, his hand reaching across the table to cover hers. The warmth of his touch made her heart ache. "So am I," he said. "I'd rather be scared with you than spend my life without you." Emma bit her lip, her tears spilling freely now. She wanted to believe him, to leap into the unknown, to follow the pull of her heart. But the image of Michael's face haunted her, his trust, his kindness, the years they had shared. "How do I walk away from someone who's never hurt me?" she whispered. Daniel's voice was low, almost pained. "By admitting that staying with him would be hurting yourself?" The words sank deep, tearing at her. She sat in silence, her heart pounding, her soul caught between loyalty and truth. Finally, she pulled her hand away, wiping her tears. "I need time." Daniel nodded, his expression calm but his eyes burning with emotion. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere this time." Emma stood, her body trembling. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, she paused and looked back at him. His gaze was steady, full of hope and pain all at once. Emma had always thought of her hometown in Oregon as a quiet place where very little ever changed. The same small shops lined Main Street. The same coffee shop with its soft yellow lights welcomed early risers. And the same old bridge stretched across the river like a memory etched in steel. She liked it that way, familiar, predictable, safe. But that morning, when she pushed open the door of the coffee shop, her life tilted in a way she never saw coming. She was just there for her usual routine, a cup of black coffee before heading to the small bookstore where she worked. The shop smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, with soft music humming in the background. Emma stood in line, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone until she heard a voice. "Excuse me, sorry. Could I grab a napkin?" It was a man's voice, deep but gentle, and something about the tone tugged at her memory. She looked up and froze. Daniel. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her mind raced back to summers spent by the river, sitting on the grass while he strummed his guitar, his voice shy but tender. She remembered the way he used to walk her home after school, always carrying her books, even though she told him not to. And then he had left. College in Seattle, work in California, and life had taken him far away. Over the years, they had exchanged a few messages here and there, but slowly the distance stretched wider until it felt like he belonged to another chapter of her life entirely. Yet here he was. He turned, napkin in hand, and his eyes landed on her. He blinked once, almost in disbelief. Then his lips curved into a slow, surprised smile. "Emma," he said, as though he wasn't sure if he was imagining her. Her throat went dry. "Daniel?" The sound of his name on her lips felt strange, like a secret she wasn't supposed to say out loud. He looked different, so different that it startled her. The boy she remembered had been lanky, with hair that always fell into his eyes. But the man standing before her carried himself with confidence. His shoulders were broader, his jawline sharper, his voice steadier. There was something in the way he stood, in the way people glanced at him as they passed, that made her realize he had grown into someone she didn't quite know anymore. "You look different," she managed, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. Daniel laughed softly. "I guess a few years will do that." Then his eyes softened. "But you look the same. Still Emma?" Something warm stirred in her chest at the way he said her name, but she quickly looked away, suddenly aware of the line moving forward. They ended up at the counter together, both ordering coffee, and when the barista handed them their cups, Daniel tilted his head toward an empty table. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked. Emma hesitated. She had work in less than an hour, and she knew she should leave, stick to her routine. But something inside her urged her to stay, as though walking away would mean losing something she didn't even understand yet. So she nodded. "Sure." They sat across from each other, the table between them far too small for the distance she felt in her heart. For a few moments they just looked at each other, both unsure of where to begin. Finally, Daniel spoke. It's been a long time." "Yeah," Emma said softly. Taz. He told her about his years away moving from one city to another, chasing opportunities, meeting people, learning who he was. His words carried the weight of experiences she couldn't picture, and yet the way he spoke still felt familiar. Like the same Daniel she had once known, only shaped by time. And you? He asked, his eyes curious. Emma shrugged lightly. I stayed. Went to college here. Started working at the bookstore. It's simple, but it's home. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she was saying. And then there was silence. Not the comfortable kind they had once shared as teenagers, but something heavier. Filled with all the years and feelings they hadn't spoken of, Emma shifted in her seat, her heart racing for reasons she didn't want to admit. Daniel's gaze was steady, searching, as though he was trying to read the parts of her life she hadn't put into words. Do you ever think about back then? He asked suddenly. She blinked. Back then? High school. Summers by the river. The music? Us. His voice dipped softer, almost cautious. Emma's stomach tightened. Of course, she thought about him. She had once imagined what it would be like if he had stayed, if life had taken a different turn. But those were just daydreams, tucked away in the corners of her mind. She couldn't admit that now. Sometimes, she said carefully, wrapping, her hands tighter around her cup. Daniel's smile was small, but knowing, me too. The air between them seemed to shift again, thick with something unspoken. Emma's pulse quickened. She told herself it was just nostalgia, that seeing an old friend after so many years was bound to stir emotions. But deep down, she knew it was more. She had walked into the coffee shop expecting nothing but her usual morning routine. Instead, she found herself staring into the eyes of someone who wasn't the boy she once knew, but wasn't a stranger either, and that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit as she left the coffee shop that morning. Her coffee half finished and her thoughts tangled. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's return wasn't just a coincidence. Something had changed. He had changed, and though she didn't want to believe it yet, she knew her life was about to change too. The days that followed Daniel's return were a blur of chance meetings and quiet conversations. Emma told herself it was nothing, that bumping into him again was just part of living in a small town where paths crossed naturally. But deep down, she knew it was more than coincidence. It was as though the universe had placed him directly in her line of sight, again and again. One afternoon, she saw him at the bookstore where she worked. He leaned against the counter, his smile lighting up the room in a way she didn't remember from before. Still surrounded by books, huh? He teased gently. Emma rolled her eyes, though she couldn't hide her smile. It's better than wandering around like a lost musician. Daniel chuckled, his voice low and warm. Fair enough, but I think you always liked it better here than anywhere else. And he was right. Emma had always found comfort in the quiet rhythm of books, stories, and familiar faces. It was safe, predictable, everything Daniel wasn't. That evening, as she closed up the store, she couldn't stop thinking about the way his eyes had lingered on her, searching like he was piecing together a puzzle he had left unfinished years ago. A few days later, he invited her for a walk by the river, the same river where they had spent endless summer nights as teenagers, skipping stones and talking about dreams that felt so far away back then. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and water, and the sky was streaked with shades of orange and pink as the sun began to sink. Emma hugged her sweater closer around her, trying to steady the rush of emotions building inside her. Daniel walked beside her, his steps unhurried, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. For a while they simply listened to the water and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It should have felt nostalgic, comforting. Instead, it felt charged, like every step brought them closer to something unspoken. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. You know, he said quietly, I used to think of you every time I played a song on my guitar. Emma's breath caught. She turned to him, her voice shaky. Daniel, I mean it, he said, his eyes steady on hers. Back then, when I didn't know what I wanted from life, The one thing I was sure about was you. I just never told you." Her chest tightened. Those were words she had once longed to hear as a girl, words she had written in secret journals, dreamed about during late nights when she stared at the stars. But now, hearing them as an adult, they carried a weight she wasn't prepared for. Because Emma wasn't the same girl she had been back then. She wasn't free to feel whatever she wanted anymore. She had Michael, her boyfriend of 3 years. Michael, who worked long hours as an accountant, who brought her coffee every Saturday morning, who never forgot to text her goodnight. He was steady, reliable, safe. Everything Daniel wasn't. Everything she thought she needed. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "We were kids. You don't mean that?" But he didn't look away. His expression was calm, steady, but there was something in his eyes that shook her to her core. "I'm not a kid anymore, Emma." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She opened her mouth to argue, to laugh it off, but the words wouldn't come, 'cause part of her knew he was right. He wasn't the shy boy with a guitar anymore. He was a man now, and every part of him radiated a quiet confidence that unsettled her. Emma quickened her steps, hoping to put space between them, but Daniel reached out and gently touched her arm. The contact was brief, but it sent a spark racing through her body, one she hadn't felt in years. "Emma," he said softly, "you don't have to pretend with me." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears she didn't understand. The truth was, she had spent years pretending that the quiet ache inside her was just life settling into routine. Pretending that stability was enough. Pretending that she didn't want something more, something deeper. Something that made her heart race, and now here Daniel was. Standing in front of her, forcing her to face feelings she had buried long ago. "Daniel, I can't," she began, but her voice broke. He shook his head, his eyes filled with something between longing and sorrow. "I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed you to know."